defines crunch time as a critical moment or period, like the end of a game, when decisive action is needed. Every sports fan knows this time in the game. Your palms sweat just a little more, your heart races just a little bit faster, and you live and die with every play until the final seconds tick off the clock and you're either celebrating a victory or disappointed by the defeat. The team at Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network understands just how critical these moments are. For us, it begins as soon as the next set of games are on the board. We evaluate the opening lines and any breaking news throughout the week. We cover each game inside and out, whether it's from inside the locker room to a huddle down on the field, the court, or the ice. We take you inside the meeting room with scouts, coaches, and executives. We have our fingers on the pulse of all the sports that we cover: the National Hockey League, NBA, college basketball, college football, and the National Football League. We are the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network, and we're here to help you find your sports advantage. After all the data has been crunched, we then turn it over to Kenneth for the best analysis around. His unique perspective in both understanding the data and how it applies to the game and how you win is the Crunch Time Sports Advantage. Are you ready? The Crunch Time Jet is fueled and ready for takeoff, and the Crunch Time Express is about to leave the station. Your VIP pass has been approved, so all aboard.
Welcome to the 2024 College Football Team Autopsy Report. An autopsy report is a document that summarizes the findings of an autopsy, an examination of a body after death. It includes details of the examination, tests, and observations performed, as well as the cause and manner of death. Just like a real autopsy report, the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network College Football Autopsy Report examines a team's body of work after the season has concluded. This report includes a review of the team's season win total and whether they met expectations, key offensive, defensive, and special teams metrics that shaped the season, a deep dive into coaching decisions, including situational play and fourth down aggressiveness, a final season grade, evaluating execution, performance in key moments, and consistency, the final verdict, analyzing what went right, what went wrong, and what must be fixed for 2025. With the 2024 season in the rearview mirror, it's time to examine the patient. To present the findings, we have called in our Chief Medical Examiner and Senior Analyst, Kenneth.
And welcome into the Crunch Time Sports Advantage Network Team Autopsy Report. Folks, we're heading down to Coral Gables. We have the Miami Hurricanes on the autopsy table because this is a team that you definitely want to stay tuned in for. If this is your first team autopsy report, welcome aboard. Whether you're watching this on our YouTube channel, streaming it on our Twitter feed at Crunchtime VIP, or listening on your favorite podcast platform, we're going to go through, as Tina mentioned, every single aspect of this team, from the coaching, offense, defense, special teams, what went wrong in 2024, and what they got to get right in 2025. We're going to start right there with the head coach, Mario Cristobal. His 14th season as a head coach, first 6 years at Florida International, really kind of struggled to find his way. 27 wins, 47 losses. Folks, that's a winning percentage of 36%. He goes out to Eugene, Oregon. Much better resources, much better talent, but also going up against much better competition. In those 5 years, Mario Cristobal was 35-13, 73% winning percentage. But there's always a but with Mario Cristobal. He could only get that team, very talented team, to the Rose Bowl once. Gotta start asking questions. Is Mario an elite head coach? We'll discuss that a little bit further from last year. In his 3 years back at his alma mater, where he won 2 national championships as an offensive lineman there, this team is 22 wins, 16 losses. Now they're coming off a 10-2 regular season, as you can see here. but this team failed to make the college football playoffs because they didn't take care of business the last couple of weeks of the season. So let's go ahead and jump into the autopsy report here. A lot to unpack. Let's start with the season win total. This team's season win total was set at 9.5 back in June. So they were able to get you to the betting window as far as that goes. Now, as far as our composite win total, we have three very specific criteria in season that helps us kind of forecast what a team's win total should be. We also, right there with the betting market, had them at a 9.5. So this team was able to exceed our expectations as well. Good job there. Now let's talk about some things that go into that. Your strength of schedule. Primarily what you can control about your strength of schedule now is your non-conference. Did you play a tough non-conference or did you load up on cupcakes? Now, the part of it that you really can't control is the look of the draw as far as your in-conference schedule. With the expanded conferences that we have throughout college football, it's not guaranteed that you're going to play the better teams in your conference. It's simply by the luck of the draw. So we're looking at Miami's 0.358, 63rd rated strength of schedule in college football. You're now talking about the very bottom of what a Power 4 would look like. Still trying to get adjusted to not having the Pac-12 back. College football. We love it. Now, your strength of record. This is basically how did your opponents do throughout their regular season in 2024. When we look at the Hurricanes, 0.508, that is 84th out of 134 teams. So not only did they not play a really strong and tough strength of schedule, their opponent's win-loss record was not that great either. We'll get to that here going on to the next slide here. Okay, so we talk about your strength of record, basically your opponent's win-loss record during the regular season. I want you to take notice of these records that I'm about to give you. You can see why I say that they had the 84th rated strength of record. Florida Gators were 7-5. Ball State was 3-9. South Florida, Virginia Tech, and Cal that they played in consecutive weekends were all 6-6. Louisville was 8-4. Florida State was 2-10. Duke was 9-3. Georgia Tech was 7-5. Wake Forest was 4-8. Syracuse was 9-3. Only 3 teams with at least 8 wins in the regular season. That tells me that the Hurricanes should have probably performed much better in than what their record was. Now, we use a baseline of 68 to kind of judge your opponent's defenses here. 68 Power 4 teams when you talk about the 4 major conferences and Notre Dame. So we want to take a look and see how many of their opponents were inside of that 68. If you're watching this on our YouTube or Twitter feed, you'll see that information on your screen. For everyone that's listening, don't worry, I got you covered here. The Florida Gators had the 17th best defense in college football last year. Virginia Tech was 28th. Cal Golden Bears were 46th. Louisville was 40th. Florida State was 51st. Duke was 45th. Georgia Tech was 15th. And then finally, Syracuse barely made the cut at 67. So 8 of their opponents were inside of that top 68. He also played 2 of the worst defenses in college football in Ball State and South Florida. So you're talking about an average defensive opponent on a week in and week out basis of 57. So you're talking about a team basically that would have been about 6-6 during the regular season, looking at their schedule. Now, let's get into the Miami Hurricane offense. Folks, you're going to hear me talk about this team being explosive and efficient last year. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you the NCAA average what their raw regular season accounting stats were in some key categories, and then what our numbers are when we adjust for opponent. The average team scored last year 28 points per game. The Canes were at 44.2. Now, when we adjust for opponent, ticks down just a hair, down to 42.9. Still well above the NCAA average, almost 2 touchdowns worth. So this team was explosive on the offensive side of the ball. As far as total passing yards per game, average team about 227 yards per game. The Canes were at 359. When we adjust for opponent, we adjust that down to 355, still well above the NCAA average in that metric. For us running the ball, average team last year about 160 yards per game last year. The Canes were at 179, and when we adjust for opponent, actually goes up to 181 per game. So this team actually could run the ball quite effectively as well. Total offense last year, teams were about 387 on average. The Canes were at 538. When we adjust for opponents, just a little bit less. We had them at 536 per game. So you're still talking about well over 150 yards better than the average offense last year. Now, let's talk about getting into some of the advanced numbers that we track here. So average team last year, drives ending with either a touchdown or field goal, about 40%. The Canes folks were at 66% last year. Drives ending with either a touchdown or field goal. Now, if you think that's impressive, wait till I give you their touchdown number. Average team last year, drives ending with a touchdown, about 20, let's call it 29%. The Canes were at 53%. So basically 1 out of every 2 drives that Canes had last year, they were putting a touchdown on the board. As far as third down conversion, this team, the NCAA average was 39%. The Canes were at 56 point, let's call it 56% on third downs. So this team was absolutely getting it done on third downs. As far as protecting the quarterback, a little bit better than average. Average team sacks during the regular season, about 23 and a half sacks. This team allowed 21 sacks. Now, you're going to have that with the quarterback that holds on to the ball quite a bit. So that's something that we can't always just put on the offensive line. Now, as far as turnovers, Canes committed 13 turnovers last year, so a little over 1 per game. Now, our super advanced numbers, how we call them our 3 E's, how effective, how explosive, and how efficient was your offense last year? Folks, Miami was absolutely electric. The number 4 rated effective offense in college football for us last year. Number 1 in explosiveness, number 1 in efficiency. The Miami Hurricanes ended the 2024 regular season as our number 1 rated offense in college football. Not a shocker when you look at their points per game output and the efficiency that they were doing that with. Just some final takeaways here. You're talking about an elite passing attack, a big play capability with their explosiveness number. A lot of that coming out of the passing game with Cam Ward last year. We'll dive a little bit deeper into some of the other metrics and why this team failed to make the college football playoff. If you can go ahead and take me to the next part of it. Okay, now let's take a look at the Canes defense. This defense was solid, but was vulnerable to giving up some big plays in key moments. Once again, we're going to take a look at that benchmark of 68. How many of Miami Hurricanes opponents' offense ranked inside of that top 68? Really want to take a look at how good this Cane defense really was last year. The Florida Gators checked in as the 25th best offense in college football last year. South Florida was 71st. Virginia Tech was 34th. So take out that South Florida. So now we have Florida at 25. We have Virginia Tech at 34. Then we go to Louisville, had number 18. See, Duke was at 59, Georgia Tech was at 61, and Syracuse was at 20. So only 6 of the offenses that they went against last year were inside of that top 68. You're now talking about an average opponent offensive power ranking of 59. You're now looking at an offense that would have been struggling to get to 6 wins. It's more than likely would have been a 5-7 offense that they would have gone up against week in and week out. So not a great cast of offenses there by the Miami Hurricanes. Now, let's take a look at their defense. Defense gave up 20, let's call it 24 points per game. When we adjust for opponent, goes down to 22. So a little bit of about a 2-point per game improvement there. As far as their passing yardage per game allowed, the Canes were giving up about 210 yards passing per game. When we adjust for opponent, that goes down about almost 30 yards, down to 181 yards per game. So excellent pass coverage there by the Canes for the most part. As far as their rushing yards, now here's where we love the adjusted numbers here. Now, if you look at just their raw numbers, giving up just 110 yards rushing per game, you would think that this was a dominant rush defense. We adjust for opponent, we get a different story. That number goes up to 147 per game, almost a 30, let's call it 36-yard differential there. Now, that puts them basically right there as an average rush defense in college football. As far as their total offense allowed to their opponents, 320 yards per game. We adjust that for opponent, just goes up to 327. So kind of feel like we had a really good take on this team last year. Now, remember our numbers that we gave you for scoring drives ending with a touchdown and third down conversion. Canes opponents scoring drives percentage, 34%. About, let's call it 6% better than the average defense in college football last year. Drives ending in touchdowns, different story. Remember, average team gave up about, let's call it 29%. Canes opponents ending drives were 27%. So more closer to the average there as far as giving up touchdowns. And third down conversions, average team gave up about 39% last year. The Canes opponents were converting third downs at a 36% clip. So just a little bit better than the average team last year. Miami did a great job of getting after the opponent's quarterbacks. 29 sacks is what we were tracking there. Now, their opponents converting on fourth down. 13 conversions on 24 attempts. Opponents' conversions on fourth downs looks like about 54%. That's just a little bit north of where the average was at 53%. Canes also forced 18 turnovers last year. When we look at their defensive 3 E's, how effective, explosive, and efficient this defense was, not as great as the offense. As far as effective defense, the Canes were 40th. As far as giving up explosive plays, 58. There were big plays being had on the Miami Hurricanes defense last year. As far as efficiency goes, 44th. Miami ended the regular season as our 47th rated defense in college football. So when we get to the field goal and kicking here, let's go ahead and jump into that right now. If I had to talk about the Miami Hurricanes special teams, I would say elite kicking and a lot of solid execution. Miami made 15 out of 16 field goal attempts, over 94% accuracy there from the field goal kickers. Excellent job there, especially when you consider the average team converted about 76% of their field goals. Did not miss a single extra point. And when we look at their punting team, averaged about 43.4 punt yards per punt. Good for about 43rd in the FBS last year. So really good job there on the special teams. Let's get back to Mario Cristobal. I talked about in the opening what his overall record. Let's take a look at last year. In one score contest, Coach Cristobal was 3-2. Same record against quality opponents. if this team sneaks out one more win against quality opponents, Miami makes the college football playoffs last year, no doubt about it. As far as being aggressive going forward on fourth downs, out of 144 qualifying coaches last year in Division I football, with some of the in-season coaching changes that we saw, Mario Cristobal was the 56th most aggressive coach going for it on fourth down. So kind of right there in the middle of the pack. And that's disappointing, especially when you look at their conversion rate on fourth down. The Canes were 11 out of 15, converting at a 73% clip on fourth down. This team could have been much more aggressive because they were converting at a amazing rate last year. Wonder how many games that cost them in not going for it on fourth down. I'm looking at two right now. Game against Georgia Tech and a game against Syracuse. Canes possibly could have been undefeated if they would have probably been a little bit more aggressive and actually gotten it done in those games. Okay, so let's talk about now, because it looks like we got about 8 minutes left on the clock here. Let's take a look at how did this team perform in their 10 wins and their 2 losses from an offensive standpoint first, then we'll kick it over to the defense. In their 10 games that they won last year, you're talking about a team that was averaging almost 47 points per game. Now, I want you to listen to the breakdown here. 38 pass attempts per game, 361 yards, 9.5 yards per attempt, 13.8 yards per completion. Cam Ward was a phenomenal quarterback last year. Probably should have found his way to New York there, putting up those numbers, kind of similar to what Jaden Daniels did in his Heisman winning season there at LSU. As far as the yards per attempt and yards per completion, anything over 9, that's an elite college number. Now, they were running the ball 34 times per game, 191 yards per game, 5.6 yards per rushing attempt. This team was averaging 552 yards of total offense, 7.7 yards per play. We're looking at this team converting on third downs at 57% on third downs. Now, they did commit a lot of turnovers in their wins, believe it or not. 11 total turnovers in 10 games. I should probably rephrase that. They were averaging basically 1 turnover per game in their wins. So maybe not as much as I initially looked at it. When I saw that high turnover number, I was like, I had to recall that they did win 10 games. So you can expect that turnover number to be kind of where it was. Now, in their 2 losses, the points per game drops down to about 30, let's call it 31 points per game. Still throwing the ball about 38 times per game. About the same yardage, 349 yards per game in those losses, 9.3 yards per attempt, 13.9 yards per completion. Now, the rushing attempts dipped down a little bit, down to about 28 rushing attempts per game, 121 yards per game, 4.4 yards per rushing attempt. The total offense goes down to about 470 per game, 7.2 yards per play. That's still more than sufficient to get wins there. Third down conversions go down to about 43%. And then they committed 2 turnovers in those losses. So really wasn't on the offense when we look at a difference between when they won versus when they lost. In those wins, they were scoring about 16 more points per game. The passing, only a 13-yard per game difference. Now, here's where we see the difference. In those wins, they were running the ball for almost 70 more yards per game. I think when we take a look at the defense is where we're going to see some major swings in numbers here. In those 10 wins, the Hurricanes defense was giving up about 22 points per game. Opponents were about 204 yards passing per game on 33 attempts, 6.2 yards per attempt, 11.3 yards per completion. The opponents were not able to run the ball. You're talking about 95 yards on 28 attempts, 3.4 yards per rushing attempt. Their opponents were converting on third downs at 31%, and they forced 17 turnovers. In the two losses, Miami was giving up 35 points per game, 240 yards passing, but only on 26 attempts. That yards per attempt goes up almost 3.4 yards per passing attempt, up to 9.2 yards per completion goes up to almost 13. The opponents were running the ball a lot more, 41 times per game, 185 yards per game rushing, 4.5 yards per rushing attempt, and their opponents were converting 67% on third downs, only forced one turnover there. So, as I said, the difference was the defense in those losses. Difference is they were giving up about 14 more points in their losses, giving up about 36 more yards passing, almost 90 more yards rushing, 126 more yards in total offense. So what went wrong for Miami last year? Well, this team struggled against power running teams. Numbers bear that out quite a bit. Allowed too many explosive plays, especially in the passing game in those key games that they lost. And then we saw the high turnover variance, both by the offense and more so by the defense. When this team was getting those turnovers, offense playing on a shorter field, converting those into touchdowns, really kind of putting the opponent behind the eight ball, that's where you saw Miami really clicking. When they couldn't get those turnovers going, breaking out the turnover chain and really forcing their opponents to play one-dimensional, that's when you really saw the Miami defense really struggle. So what is the final grade for the Miami Hurricanes? Well, that's coming up right now. Folks, the Miami Hurricanes in 2024 will get a final grade of an A-. Why? This team, from an offensive standpoint, elite passing game. They had a very explosive offense and really good on third down efficiency. Weaknesses, defensive lapses, especially in big-time games. Struggled against the run and way too many unforced errors when we're talking about penalties. Final verdict, Miami was one of the most dynamic teams in the country, but defensive inconsistencies prevented them from reaching the playoffs last year. No doubt about that. So what are the three keys that this team must fix in 2025 if they want to make the college football playoffs this year? One, defensive improvements, improving the pass defense efficiency and limiting explosive big plays by their opponents. That's number one. Number two, Mario has to be better, whether it's against quality opponents or close games. We continue to see this with this head coach coming up short, just going 3-2 in those situations last year. If he would have gotten one more win in those two situations, the Canes make the college football playoffs. And then finally, fourth down defense. The Canes opponents were just way too good on fourth down when we're looking at that metric there. As I gave it out earlier, the Canes opponents were converting 13 out of 24 attempts on fourth downs. Have to play better fourth down defense, get off the field, and get your offense back the ball. If the Hurricanes can focus on these three areas, the Canes can take a step forward, compete for that ACC championship, and make it to the college football playoffs.
Thank you for tuning into this podcast. We hope you enjoyed today's episode and our deep dive into all things college football. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review the show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching on YouTube, be sure to like this video and hit that subscribe button. You can follow us on Twitter at CrunchTimeVIP for updates, insights, and more content. And make sure to visit our website at crunchtimesportsadvantage.com for in-depth blogs, game previews, and information about our Crunch Time Express handicapping packages. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time for our next patient on the 2024 College Football